Hey, it's Dave Brown here, host of Now with Dave Brown on AMI. Check out this latest highlight from the show.
Let's continue our conversation on design and inclusion. We've got the federal election campaign underway, and party leaders are making lots of campaign promises. And it can be a lot to try and keep track of. And that's where party websites can come in handy. But how accessible are those websites? Digital accessibility specialist Denis Boudreau took a look at how those websites stacked up and joins us this morning from Montreal. He's also the founder of Inclusive Communication. Denis, welcome back. How you doing?
Well, thank you. I'm doing great. You?
I'm fantastic. Glad to be here. I'm a huge political junkie. I spend a lot of time online checking out websites and looking for some of the promises that we're talking about here. But before we get to party websites, you also looked at the Elections Canada website and how accessible it was in regard to requesting a mail-in ballot. What did you find there?
I actually found that was really accessible. I wasn't that surprised because there's been a lot of effort for years from the federal government to really establish standards around accessibility and meeting those requirements. So everything was very good from that perspective. Most basic things were covered very easily. So that was very like a pleasant confirmation of what I expected.
Let's then shift to the parties themselves. And what did you find there as far as inclusivity, accessibility of the party websites?
Well, that's probably where it starts to fall apart a little bit. I'm assuming most people would be expecting that as well, considering that the sites are typically put together really quickly and all of those different things. The first thing that surprised me, I have to admit, like most Canadians, I guess, I wasn't aware that we have 20 parties actually running right now that are official parties. So initially I wanted to look at all 20 of them, get a sense of that, and I did that to a certain extent. Most of them being very inaccessible in that sense. But I did focus more on the 5 major parties, the ones that we hear about the most. So, Conservatives, Liberals, Green Party, NDP, and Bloc Québécois. So those are the ones that I looked at from different angles. The typical angles like running an automated testing tool on those sites to see what comes out, like the low-hanging fruits, see what comes out of those websites. So I'll give you a little bit about that in a minute, but also from the perspective of keyboard navigation, which is a huge thing for someone who has a vision impairment, for instance, being able to rely on the keyboard instead of relying on your mouse and your ability to point and click on things. So again, varying levels of success there. And then, things like leveraging headings in your content or leveraging landmarks as sections of your page to help you navigate more easily around different areas of the page. So being able to navigate straight to your main content or your footer, for instance, without having to go through everything. And then when you get to one of those aspects, being able to leverage a heading structure to make sense of what you're being offered. So those were basically the things that I looked at. Then I also looked at the platforms themselves, like what they're actually promoting. And as usual, every single site uses a PDF to do that. Most of them are very inaccessible or poorly tagged. So, like coded in a way that doesn't lend for a lot of accessibility. So that's not a great area. The actual, to give you a sense of who sort of scores a little better in different areas, like when it comes to the platforms, the one that did best was probably the one from the Liberals, where the PDFs were a little shorter and a bit more well organized, so they were easier to use from a screen reader standpoint. When you look at it from the perspective of these basic tests that we ran, the one that was the best, not by far, but the best still was the Green Party, followed by Conservatives, and then NDP, Liberal, and then Bloc Québécois came in last when it came to those things. Typical issues that you would find there would be things like image with no alt text, so no description for those images, or links or buttons that you can't really tell what they're doing because they don't have a label assigned to them. So you hear about a link or a button, but you don't really know what they do. And then different elements in terms of color contrast were issues there as well. that sort of thing. And then from a keyboard standpoint, again, to sort of gauge the whole thing, the one that had the best experience was by far the NDP. Everything worked really well from a keyboard-only standpoint. And then the other ones were somewhat good overall, except for the Conservative Party, which had a really, I'm going to use the term lightly, but a terrible experience, where you lose sight of your focus regularly, and then you get trapped in different areas and you can't move forward or go back. So you get stuck there and you can't really navigate without a mouse. So conservatives in that sense are doing much worse than the others when it comes to keyboard navigation. But the other ones are doing fairly well. And like I said, the NDP comes out on top with a much easier way to navigate through those. So that's roughly what that looks like.
I think an interesting study would be sort of the ratio or the juxtaposition of a party's messaging on accessibility and their actual delivery of their campaign, whether we're talking about the web design, whether we're talking about campaign headquarters, whether we're talking about signage, all those things, all sort of lumped in together under the umbrella of accessibility. I think that'd be kind of interesting to see how they fare messaging versus actual actions.
Right. Well, it wouldn't be that hard to do. I mean, just the websites themselves, they either have a stance on accessibility and inclusion or they don't. Not every site has an accessibility page, for instance. And, it's one thing to have an accessibility policy on your website stating how you care about people with disabilities. It's another thing to actually have a website that communicates in a way that is inclusive to those who have disabilities. And I think that's where there's a gap for most of them right now.
If let's say I'm a political party, Denis, and I'm setting up my messaging, my website, what's the first thing you're telling me to do so that I am inclusive, so that my inclusive design principles are adhered to?
The first thing would probably be to just put your mouse aside and just start using your tab key on your keyboard and navigate through your site to see how things are going. If the order in which you get the different elements on your page is predictable, logical, intuitive, if that makes sense, if you can see where you're going at all times with your keyboard, with the focus ring as you're moving from one item to the other, that's a huge place to start. And then, there are a bunch of tools out there. The tool that I use is called Axe Dev Tools by a company called DQ Systems. It basically spits out all the very basic accessibility issues that you can easily fix if you have a developer on hand that can help with your code, with coding. So those two aspects probably cover around 75% of the issues that most sites would have. And it doesn't require a lot of technical knowledge to just operate these tools. The keyboard obviously is pretty straightforward. You just tab and use your enter key and space bar and your arrow keys, and that's it. But the automated tool also is just a button. You install a plugin on your browser, say Chrome, for instance, and you just run the tool. You click the button, and then it spits out a report of all the different issues that you have. So not very difficult to do if you actually are aware. And some of them are more aware than others. I mean, one of the things that I didn't share with you was about whether or not the sites were providing a skip link. So I skipped the main content from the very top of the page to just avoid going through all the navigation on every single page. And some of them actually had implemented a really nice version of that. So people are aware of some of these things. They might not see the entire picture about accessibility. So, again, in this case, Green Party, Liberals, and NDP had such a thing implemented on their site to help with navigation. And the NDP was, again, the one that was the most elegant way to do it. Most elegant implementation was theirs.
Now, in knowing that these websites can be a very important resource for voters and doing a quick audit of these websites, how do you come away feeling about what you found? I mean, are you hopeful? Were you frustrated? How do you feel about it?
I'm not frustrated because, we see this all the time. This is probably my, 7th or 8th election where I pay attention to accessibility, whether it's at the provincial or federal level or even in the States. And it's always the same story. Like it's always lacking from the perspective of whether or not the parties want to communicate their ideas. Doing all of that through a PDF is already very exclusive in that sense, and it really takes a lot of people out of the conversation. And in that sense, the Bloc Québécois, for instance, is definitely, saying that, well, I mean, they're not saying that they don't want to talk to you if you have a disability, but their PDF for their platform basically says that on their behalf. And your Conservative Party and Green Party are also saying very similar things. The bigger difference between the Bloc Québécois and the Conservatives and the Green Party is that the later two actually bothered with tagging their document, which means that there is some structure behind it for a screen reader, as opposed to Bloc Québécois, where there isn't anything at all. And your Liberal and NDP add some basic structure in there that was decent but not great. So you would still get away frustrated as a screen reader user if you went through those PDFs, but at least you would have gotten something. So, maybe there's a way to look at it. From the perspective of whether or not they communicate their ideas to people with disabilities, again, as a reminder, 22% of the population, they're definitely all lacking in very obvious ways.
Denis, this has been a really great way to kick off week 2 of the federal election campaign, a really neat angle to look at it from, and we really appreciate you being here and sharing your insight. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Have a great day. You too. Denis Boudreau, Digital Accessibility Specialist here at AMI and the founder of Inclusive Communication.
Do you want to dive into more conversations like this? Watch Now with Dave Brown weekdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on AMI TV or download the podcasts wherever you listen. Do you want to dive into more conversations like this? Watch Now with Dave Brown weekdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on AMI TV or download the podcasts wherever you listen.